Today, I'm talking with Martha Jackson-Jarvis at her studio. Well, Martha, it's great coming back to your studio. It's always a pleasure. It's such an interesting space, and I'm glad that you are able to spend some time with me today. I'd like to play catch up. I haven't seen you in over a year and a half, and it was the fall of 2011.
Yes.
I'd like to know what you're doing now, and also I want to go backtrack a little bit because I'm curious as to how you got started into this public art. You're an accomplished painter and sculptor. How did you decide, or what made you decide to go into public art?
First of all, let me welcome you back to the studio. It's always a pleasure to have you visit. And always to have conversation with another artist is always invigorating. So I appreciate the time. Well, I started in public art. Very interesting. There was a real kind of organic way of growing into it. I guess my work has always been involved with sculpture and natural materials. I started out as a base material, working with building material, not in terms of pottery or decorative kinds of things. So I was always making things to construct something else with, the material. And then I have to say that the work sort of naturally grew into doing temporary installation kind of work, that I would build these environments that not just single pieces, but I always work with multiples of things, a reproduction of many things, being able to make one note and then to make several and then a series. So I did a body of work, I would say, for almost a solid decade or 2 decades, maybe a solid decade of temporary large-scale installations. I think for me, usually for sculpture, when you think about scale, we often think about the monolith, this one huge thing. But I was always interested in scale in relationship to the minute, the minuscule, the miniature little thing. 1 grain of sand to make up an entire beach, or 1 stone to make an entire mountain. So my sense of scale was always somehow related to the landscape. And I think we talked about it before. I grew up in the rural South, and I have to say that informed me tremendously, the environment of, playing in the mud and the red clay of Virginia and the woods, and the sense of discovery of natural materials. I always loved that, and I think I carried that with me in terms of my art, construction, always trying to tell a story, if you will, a certain narrative. And usually that narrative is somehow related to the landscape. And so oftentimes, particularly into the southern landscape that's there. So, long story short, in terms of, I think I started into public art with, starting temporary installations. And then I grew weary of doing temporary things. I was always working with very permanent materials, some of the most permanent materials that we have on Earth. Once clay is fired, some of my oldest artifacts are fragments of these things. So I would start breaking shards and reincorporating and recycling it into the work, working with stone and wood and materials like that. So I was working with permanent sort of building materials. So I started to really feel that I wanted to create something more permanent. And I know the idea about what is permanent and everything's impermanent. Nothing's permanent. But at the same time, longevity. I'm interested in materials that withstand the test of time in a way. So I think that was kind of the natural progression in terms of public art, being able to, and there was an element about public art that really intrigued me, and that's the notion that it belongs to everyone. It was a way, and of course the museums have opened their doors and become much more inviting to the public now in recent years. But heretofore, it was, a place kind of sanctioned away from the public, and not everyone had access. Of course, you could go there, but did they go there? But so I'm very interested in what becomes the public arena, our communal spaces. And I think those kind of places and spaces will become even more important in the future as space becomes limited on the earth, as our numbers increase, as global warming happens and our land base decreases. They really will become almost sacred spaces. So I see how we nurture, how we deal with the in-between places for people to create kind of a network, if you will. We all have our private spaces, but when we enter into the larger environment, how do we interact with each other? Are we moving quickly all the time, or do we need respite? When I'm standing at the bus stop, why can't I stand in an object that's somehow edifying and beautiful and contemplative in a way? So public art starts to address all those kind of issues that I find really intriguing and challenging at the same time. So that's my interest.
What is your primary goal when creating a project?
Well, first of all, I try to work on projects that I am genuinely interested in. I try to apply myself in depth. There is oftentimes, and it's intriguing, a tremendous amount of research that goes into the background, the backstory of the piece, how it evolves, to get to, and I use this word a lot, an authentic narrative about there's a narrative in every place. I feel like I'm almost engaged in this living archaeological dig, how to unearth the truth about a site, a time, a history. It's all here. And you don't have to make it up. It's like connected to our history, human history, the placement on earth, where we are at the moment. So I try to answer all of those questions, within each project. And when you start answering some of those questions, when you start digging, unearthing these issues or histories or sometimes mysteries or lost ideas, it's intriguing. It's like, wow, look at this. You find, it's like going through the stacks at the library. I mean, now it's all digitally done, but, going through the old stacks, I love doing that because you would invariably come upon something you had no idea you were really looking for, but there it was. So there's this great, almost like treasure hunt that you become engaged in, it becomes intriguing. And then one thing feeds into the next, and then you find your way. And then it starts to evolve a narrative, a story, something that can not only touch me and my interests, but maybe touch you, and then, intrigue someone else. But then how do you present it? Not to present it in such a closed way that it's only my thinking. I like to present things in a way where others can find a place within it. You can find an entry point. There's more than one entry point, You don't have to understand abstract art and formal color theory to look at a beautiful painting or to look at a beautiful installation and feel an openness. You say, wow, this is, that's the power of art. It has the power to edify, to deliver more, more than just the sum of, acrylic paint, oil paint, canvas, paper, sticks and stones, glass, whatever the individual materials are we're working with. It becomes part of this larger matrix that delivers more. It's the thing that pulls humanity forward. We can't live without it. And that's, I aim to create something along that line. You have to walk that border line, It's a tough little line, but it's intriguing.
Does one project stand out for you over the years, and if so, why?
Mm-hmm. Well, there is one that stands out, and that was the spheres. I did the Music of the Spheres project, and that was and is for me a spectacular project. I think it was. First of all, I mean, the engineering of it. I mean, it was really working very closely with the engineers to really engineer. It looks like it's very passive because it just looks like balls, you know, sitting on the ground. But in actuality, we had to. There was a parking garage under the ground. It isn't solid ground, so we had to work, you know, structurally off of like where the bedrock was, and do like a column that went all the way down and tie into it, and then to do, you know, fabricate the steel into this perfectly round sphere, and then, you know, just the geometry of how many square feet to really cover a sphere and to work on it. And I had to set up, they were much too large to get into the studio, so I set up an exterior studio over in the field, and we worked, you know, for maybe a year in fabricating them all, you know, inch by inch. And I just think they're really, it's a spectacular.
Now, where
project.
are they?
They're at the corner of Van Ness and Connecticut Avenue, on Connecticut Avenue.
And those
Up near the Metro, right there, the Van Ness Metro.
And there's so many messages that you can gain from a piece. But it seems to me that it would be more challenging as an artist to do a public art piece versus something that you just decided to do because that's what you feel like doing. Because there's an end result that you already have before you that you have to achieve, but make it interesting at the same time. And I find that very intriguing in terms of the complexity.
Yes.
So you have a message that you're creating, but at the same time you have to honor the source that's asked you to do this piece.
Yes, that's part of what I call the matrix of it. You know, there's stakeholders. You know, when you, in a public piece, it isn't just, as you say, your personal, private idea. Of course, they come to you as an artist because they want you, what you can bring to it, that creativity. But there are issues that must be addressed, you know, the place, the community. What is it that's being asked of you? What is it? What does the site ask of you? What are the materials asking of you? What are the, not just funders, and most people will just direct it, well, who's paying you and you have to give them what they want. No, you don't. What you have to do is find a way to be incredibly creative with your set. Everything has limitations, you know. They're not limitations in terms of lack of possibilities, but parameters. Let's think of it like parameters, right? The ocean is endless. Not really. The ocean is, you know, here, and the ocean is there, you know. One ocean. There's not several oceans. There's one ocean on the planet, you know. A land base is from here to here, you know. The space that you have to work with is from here to here. So you work within these boundaries, and that becomes like your canvas, you know. If you're a musician, it becomes like the notes that you work with, you know. If you are a painter, it becomes like your brush, you know. If you're a sculptor, you know, space. I paint the space. I work with space and objects in space and how we move through space. So I don't see these specifications that arise as limitations, but challenges. These are things that must be addressed. And then what you have to do as an artist, or what I try to do, I strive to do it, is to meet each one of those in a very creative way, in a poetic way. That's why they come to me. Because they can go to the construction worker, they can go to the guy who's just going to lay the tiles on the floor. Not that they're not creative people, but when you come to an artist, there's another level that is expected, and it should be, you know. And then you have to work with multiple complexities. That's the challenge. But when met, the end result is phenomenal. Could be, you know, can be phenomenal in addressing these issues. And at the same time, these are issues that need to be addressed. When I talk about public space, this belongs to all of us. The streets should be accommodating. They should not be accommodating to how we walk and how we move. It should be accommodating to how we feel, how we envision each other, how we interact with each other. If it's, is it a barrier? Do we build taller walls to keep everyone out? Or do we invite others in? Do we make communal spaces where we can all exist in a very interesting and dynamic way to begin to draw from each other? Differences, it isn't always, and as you're working on solving these problems, and it usually isn't the traditional easy answer, it isn't the cliche answer that really triggers something, but it's to dig deeper, the unexpected sometimes, the unexpected person or character introduced into a formula can change everything, but we know that's how the world works.
Until next time, I'm Jenny Glover for Voicing Art.